bench.
At the bench.
At the bench. It's episode 13. Episode what?
Lucky 13.
That's 2022, but yeah, whatever. Episode 13. So it's been a month, maybe.
Oh, it's been a while, brother.
Much has happened in both our lives. More you than me, probably. But maybe not. Who knows?
Well,
So what is up? What is up on the bench? At the bench.
couple things. If you check out my Instagram, Greg Platzer Guitars, or my Facebook, Greg Platzer Guitars, you'll see some of the projects I've been working on long term. And Justin's Les Paul is almost done. I started running out of space, so I make these little hooks and then hang the guitar. And you can hang a shit ton of guitars in a bench or in a basement. Justin's guitar. This, if you look back through, you'll see that this was shattered. The neck was broken all the way through and everything. And actually, let's get a little more light on here. There we go. And now you can see that the headstock is finished and nice and smooth. And remember, this thing was completely shattered. And now you can see how nice it is. So I'm actually doing assembly today. Frets are done. And we removed the original frets. I say we, and I mean me. Yeah. Removed the original frets, glued everything all back together, and then put the frets back and re-arched them and reinstalled them and just buffed them out. And so today is assembly day. And on 22 October, he's got a gig if he's out of the hospital, which I believe he's out right now. And I look forward to seeing this guitar get played. So update on Justin's guitar. And if you go back to the Justin's guitar posts, you'll find a GoFundMe. And if you're so inclined, and I wish you would be, you can contribute because the financial burden of his life is ridiculous. Anonymous people have paid for his repair, so he won't be dropping a dime on this, but he's still got to live. So
yeah,
skip the next couple packs of cigarettes, the next 6-pack, the next several McDonald's. Send him $20. It might not be much to you, but it might be a lot to him. So, yeah. And that's what charity's all about, kids.
$20 repeated.
Yeah. And then
small incremental steps.
Baby steps.
Incremental baby steps.
Yeah. And then
the pathway to greatness.
This is Craig's guitar. You'll see on the media. He wanted satin black with ghost flames, and now he has satin black with ghost flames. So this guitar will get assembled this week. A lot of assembly this week. A lot of guitars just kind of got to the point where
assembly is like
it's like Christmas.
Yeah. It's like the you see the end of the road.
Absolutely. It takes forever.
Like you see the finish line.
Yeah, it takes forever for me to get a guitar to assembly because I'm so anal about the details. But once we get to the point where they can be put back together, then I have to literally lay back on the coffee and do it slowly and carefully, because that's when the mistakes are made.
Coffee is the culprit?
Well, no. With me, it's like 2 pots and then I get going and I can get a little twitchy. But when you're assembling, you're so excited to get the guitar done that sometimes the enthusiasm can take over the caution. And I literally tell myself, because I'm an addict, I have 37 years of sobriety, and one of the things that I have to deal with on a daily basis is I want to get everything. I want to experience as much as I can in life, and so I will rush things if I'm not careful. And when I come down the stairs to here, one of the things I do is I constantly check myself. And when I'm working on somebody else's guitar, I literally annoy myself by asking, "How you doing, Greg?" Every 5 minutes, I say to myself, "How you doing?" And what that does is that keeps me on task, and it keeps me from getting too excited. Now, that being said, let me hang this back up. On my own stuff, I rush forth pell mell, uh, like this. I did not like this helmet. And you look on Insta, there's a post about this. This is a Bell helmet. It's a very good helmet. And I was looking for them, and they were like $225 or something like that in black. And I played at Susquehanna Harley a while back, and they had my size on sale, and it had this stupid aged graphic on it that was supposed to make it look like it was 75 years old. And it looked stupid, but it was the helmet I wanted, and it was 75 bucks.
Yeah, yeah.
So I bought it. Well, the other day I was riding and I was wearing my other lid, and I thought, I should start wearing this helmet, but it looks stupid. And I was going to just paint it satin black. And I thought, wait a minute. So this is the second stage of 3 stages to make a Eddie Van Halen thing out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Because
What's the
what Eddie
third
had done
stage?
what Eddie had done is painted his Strat body black, then taped it off, painted it white, and then after a while, everybody was copying that, so he just put random tape over top of the black and white and painted it red. And that's what I'm doing today. In between all the other things I have to do, I'm going to throw stripes on this and hit it with some red. And then once it dries up, then I'll peel all the tape off of everywhere, and it'll look cool, and I'll be a little higher visibility than just a black helmet.
Yeah, yeah.
Not dying is a good thing.
Yes. I appreciate the fact that you wear a helmet. Not everyone does.
No, and
I am.
having witnessed what happens when somebody's not wearing a helmet, I absolutely wear a helmet.
Yeah.
Um,
It's not
and,
worth the risk.
well, yeah, and I have friends that wear these, $15 plastic fake helmets, and it's like, what's your head worth, man? I mean, granted, I only paid 75 bucks for that helmet because it was on blowout, but it's a very good helmet. And that's the point is, you know, I, I don't need people to look at me riding my bike and go, there's a freedom guy. No,
Yeah.
I don't really care what they think.
Yeah.
I ride the bike for me, not for you. But,
Yeah.
oh, and other things I'm working on. I have a very good friend who basically lets me do what I want. And this is something I'm doing that I want to do. And he just basically, I build him guitars. And sometimes he gives me an idea, and sometimes with this one, I contacted him. I said, it'd be really cool. And he said, what? Because he was interested in Korina V's. And he kept sending me pictures of Korina V's that he had seen. And I said, it'd be really cool. And I said, how about a Korina V with a redwood top? And so redwood trees, for those that don't know, are those big trees that they drive cars through out in the American Northwest.
Mhm.
And so the figure is very, very outrageous on redwood. And
So
I'm
that's
trying,
your work?
yeah. And so this is almost done. In fact, what I want people to do is in the comments, I used Bakelite for the pick guard because it's ultra uber shiny.
Mm-hmm.
And then I made the guitar satin and antique the hardware. Now I can't decide if I want the shiny guard or should I satin that down. So those of you that are watching in the comments, say satin or shiny. Give your opinion on the guard. I'm not changing the color. Don't tell me it needs a tortoise guard or a green guard or your
Yeah.
grandmother's face on the guard. It's going to be this guard. Now, do I
That is
leave it?
sharp. That is sharp.
Yeah,
How quick does okay, so I know
not,
I
not at all.
I know in previous lifetimes you have spent meticulous time and love and energy on guitars.
Yeah.
I have not talked to you in a month and you produce this thing?
Well, I when I get excited about something,
Uh-huh.
um, everything else kind of fades away.
Yeah.
And so I've been working on this. Actually, I was working on it last time we talked. I just didn't bring it up.
I got
There's stuff going on in here that I'm not telling anybody about.
you. Yeah, yeah.
There's a lot of things that I work on that the world never sees.
Yes.
Because people will send me guitars and I will get the job because A, my skills, and B, my discretion. Um, some people don't want the world to know that they own amazing guitars. I'd say probably half of the people that own 59 Sunbursts don't tell anybody they own one. Because why tell people, hey, I have something that's really valuable and you should probably break into my house?
Yeah.
Um, I had a friend who had a pretty extensive art collection. And I don't know shit for art. And it wasn't Rembrandts and stuff like that. It was like, you know, paint splattered on
Jackson Pollock.
big, well, no, but on like figurines and stuff like that. I mean, it was weird stuff, stupidly expensive. And his local paper did a piece on how he collected this style of art. And 3 days later, while he was at the movies, his house was hit and a couple $1 million worth of art was taken. So, there's a lot of people that have pretty extensive guitar collections and they don't feel the need to let people know.
Hmm.
And I get to work on some of this stuff. Recently, I was in a room. A fellow I've been working on his stuff for years and years and years, and I delivered some. I delivered to his house. Yeah, no. Actually, I helped him move one of his guitars to one of my other guys, and the guy wrote a check, and I just hopped on a scoot and I rode to this guy's house, and he said, "Let me show you the room," and I was like, "Oh, the room, cool." And we went down into the bowels of his beautiful house, and he opened this door, and it was Disneyland. um, a whole wall of late 60s Marshalls, not 70s, not 80s, late 60s, early Marshalls, including an offset panel Marshall and some super early custom color stuff. And then he had a wall of tweed Fender stuff. And then he had a bunch of modern stuff. And then the wall of beat up cases was amazing. We started case cracking, and we were just two guys giddy with the excitement of what we were looking at, what we were experiencing. And
What kind of
that
guitars?
afternoon, what?
What kind of guitars were in the cases?
Oh, vintage Fender stuff, vintage Gibson stuff. Some stuff that had been on magazine covers, some stuff that was owned by famous people. Um, all exemplary pieces. Some so battered they were fantastic. And the cool thing was he and I were enjoying them for what they are. It wasn't a matter of he wasn't showing off. He
Yeah.
was like, "Oh, you want to see something else great?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." And it was kind of like sharing the experience of the wonder of these instruments. And they're locked away, and you can't get to them, and you have nobody has any idea that this stuff exists.
Yeah.
And it's not even near where I am right now. So don't start hitting all the neighbors' houses. But that was just one of these really meaningful afternoons. I'd worked on several of the guitars that were there and many that he had that he doesn't have anymore. And I will work on all of his guitars because when he gets something, first thing he does is puts it on my bench and makes me go through it.
Hmm.
But we were literally a couple of 13-year-olds looking through comic books. It was just so much
What are they?
fun.
Guitar nerds.
We're guitar nerds.
Guitar
And
nerds, sir.
yeah, and there's a responsibility when you're a nerd to really enjoy yourself. And um
What's like you're drawing the connection to art,
absolutely.
the fine art, and yeah,
Well,
these are not the these are these we don't need these to live, but it makes our life so much better.
but it helps when they look really, really cool.
Yeah, no, that is wonderful. So
So,
it should be noted that like not all usage of the Flying V guitar is metal.
oh no.
We have lots of
I
guys
mean,
like Albert King,
the
Ron
Flying V was
Jackson,
designed in 1957, 56, 57.
pre metal, pre British invasion.
pre-Dave Mustaine.
Yes.
Yeah, essentially what happened was this upstart Leo Fender had started a solid body guitar company, and he was a fan of Eli Whitney, and Eli Whitney
Yeah.
invented the production line. And
Cotton.
so
Yep.
Leo Fender said, well, if you've got a really nice guitar and you drop it and break it, it's no good anymore because you've got to get the neck replaced. And if it's all glued in, so he started making bolt-on neck guitars. His first guitar was called the Broadcaster with a K, which then became the Telecaster. And then once he set everybody on their ear, and Gibson already had the Les Paul series. By the way, Gibson wasn't going to put Gibson on the headstock. They were just going to put Les Paul on the headstock because he was the rock star of the time. And if the thing failed, they didn't want it to bring down the sales of other Gibson instruments.
Yeah.
Well, the 1953 Les Paul Gold Top, the second year of production, they made more that year than any other production year. So everybody just went, whoa, this is great. Well, 52, in 1950, Leo Fender, who was a good friend of Les Paul's, ironically, started making solid body guitars out in California with the Broadcaster, which became the Tele, of course. And then in 54, he came out with the Stratocaster, which had 3 pickups instead of 2, and a really sexy body and some cool pick art. And it was a beautiful guitar, and it basically gave us surf music. And at the time, you had Gibson, Fender, Gretsch, and Rickenbacker. They were the major manufacturers in the United States. And but what Leo did was his guitars were made up of parts bolted together, and as a result, he basically that became the new in thing. Because Gibson guitars were very classic looking. The Les Paul looked like a mini jazz guitar, and so Gibson got a reputation as being very stodgy. Well, Ted McCarty was the fellow running Gibson at the time, and he said, "Well, we can't have this. We're losing the youth vote here. We need to show everybody that we're actually very progressive at Gibson." So they hired some automotive designers, and the automotive designers brought forth 4 guitar designs, 3 of which Gibson patented: the Flying V, the Futura, which became the Explorer, and the Modern, which looks like Gumby waving at you. It's a stupidly ugly guitar.
Yeah, I think it's cool.
It looks like a Flying V that
How
somebody
many of those are in existence?
0 documented actual ones and probably 5,000 fakes.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, nobody. Billy told me he has one, but Billy Gibbons, but he's not sure if it's real. And they were the very first guitars, like the V and the Futura, which after a little bit of body tweaking became the Explorer. They were shown at the 57 NAMM show, in the summer NAMM show, and then in 58 they both went into production. They made 19 Explorers and 81 Vs, and that's it. And they were a complete sales failure. And even though everybody liked rocket ships and stuff like that, in fact, the Explorer, hang on a sec. For those that are unaware of what an Explorer looks like, here is a nice little piece of Korina. This is an Explorer body. I'm building one for myself and one for Sarah. And this is, I'm telling you what, this weighs about what a pack of cigarettes weighs. This is white Korina. And we'll talk about Korina in a minute, but essentially this was a trendy wood at the time, and they didn't realize it would sound fantastic. It was just a lot of furniture was made out of it. The wood's actually called Limba. Korina is a trade name. And you look at, there's all kinds of old stereo systems and a lot of furniture and stuff, mid-century furniture, that's either mahogany, which was the other guitar wood, or Korina. Um, so this is some really, really, really sweet ultra light Korina, and you can see it's made. I had to put two pieces together, and I couldn't center seam it because when you cut this actually came from this area. This part right here. If you
Okay.
look close, you can see how that inverted fit into this. It was just one block,
Okay.
um, and then it was joined together. But so this is white Korina. This is the hardest stuff to find. And it basically, the easiest way to describe it is it's halfway between mahogany and spruce. It's very lightweight. The cells are basically uncolored.
Hmm.
So as a result, it appears to be almost white. I've heard it called white Korina. I've heard it called um, pale Korina. I've heard it called all kinds of things, and you can call it whatever. You can call it Bill if you want. I don't care.
Yeah.
But that is what I call plain Korina or white Korina. And then let's see here. So when a tree with no cell coloring grows near water, it's going to absorb the minerals in the water. So here is the exact same wood that grew near water. And we call that black Korina because you can see all of the stuff that was drawn up into the wood as it was growing. And if you look at the end grain, you can see all of the way it pulled it up into the stuff. And
Yeah. Was it like a lot of Spectre basses? Did they go through a stage where
no, that was spalted maple. Spectre went crazy with spalted maple.
Okay.
Spalted maple is essentially wood that's been laying on the ground for long enough that bugs have eaten through it and all manner of stuff. And what you do is you fill the voids with epoxy and you get this really cool look. And when I was a Spectre dealer, we had a lot of spalted maple instruments come through, and it still has structural integrity. Um, and when you run black or brown epoxy to fill up the voids, and when you sand it, it looks like it has a lot of texture, but it's super smooth. Um, the interesting thing about Korina is uh, each tree has a different growth pattern, and then of course, you know, where it grows near the water. Um, but I can show you like this piece I just showed you. I have some other black Korina over here. And here you can see, even though it's the exact same wood, you can see a totally different pattern
Mhm.
of how it pulled the minerals up into the tree. And yes, my wood guy knows what he's doing,
Mhm.
except that he writes backwards. Isn't that bizarre? Um, so you can see where basically there might have had a really rainy season or there was a flood or something for a while. And you can see how there's a whole lot of mineral in the wood there. And I actually prefer this to the white
Light. Yeah.
Korina because it's interesting
Yeah.
and it doesn't sound any different. The guitars I made for ZZ Top were black Korina. And I'm going to be making another one for Billy. In fact, I might use this body blank. Um, I was out there with them in well, actually, I've seen them several times since we last talked
All right.
down in Baltimore, and then they were just in Shippensburg over the weekend, last weekend, and Billy had a really cool SG with a flying V headstock with the pointed headstock on it that was all distressed, and it was awesome looking. And I took some pictures, and they're on my media, they're on my Instagram. One
Great.
of these days, I'm going to put all this stuff on my website, but it's all I can do just to get it on the Instagram with everything I'm doing.
Hmm.
Maybe I need somebody out there to volunteer to populate my my website with stuff. If there's anybody who wants to help me out with that, I'll find a way to make it worth your while. But anyway, this is Korina, fantastic wood. Nobody knew when Gibson was making the V and the Explorer, nobody knew that many years later those guitars would be ultra desirable.
Mhm.
I sold a 59 6 years ago for $90,000. And now that same guitar is probably worth 300,000 because Joe Bonamassa started playing them, and he's been going around and buying them, and they've gone through the roof. And, other factors are involved as well, not just the Joe B effect, but um, I remember when.
Yeah, they are an investment. They
Well,
can
yeah, I mean,
be. Guitar.
there's no buying them for
None of
500
mine.
bucks and selling them for 300 grand. You know, there's none of that stuff. And I think, when I sold that one for 90, I think it was for like maybe like 6 grand profit. You make more money on used cars than you do on
Yeah.
expensive guitars nowadays because everybody knows what the stuff's worth. Everybody. And if it's an actual V, actual Explorer, whatever, then everybody knows the backstory on it. Because with the internet, provenance has become very good for established instruments. Problem is, there are those that would take this and build it out as if it were a real Explorer and put a Gibson logo on it. And oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Um, and there are many that are unscrupulous that have done that have taken
That's also like a
Korina and
bluegrass
built
thing too.
Explorer.
That's like a
Yeah.
that's like a bluegrass thing. How banjo players will copy like Gibson banjos,
Oh,
and
or
they
they'll
don't
get a
see it.
tenor.
They
Yeah,
don't see it.
you get a tenor and you make a fake 5 string neck for it, and boom.
Well, they
Yeah.
don't see it bad. They don't. It's a thing to do to clone a Gibson banjo.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's funny that we don't see that in cars. We don't see fake Bentleys driving down the street.
typically, we don't see that in guitars,
Oh no, I get a lot of forgeries, misrepresented guitars.
but
Uh,
we think poorly on it.
well, we should, we should.
I know, but what I'm saying is, in the bluegrass community, it's a thing.
Yeah, yeah. There's,
It's a
I,
thing that they don't look poorly at it.
I know 3 or 4 mandolin builders that their name is not Gibson, but that's what they say
Yeah,
when the mandolins leave their shop, and
yeah,
I don't agree with that, man.
yeah.
I don't agree with that at all.
It's a different culture.
My headstock on my Les Paul style guitars, my headstock is smaller and narrower, so you can't make a Gibson headstock out of it.
Hmm.
And like when I do these Explorers up and stuff like that, it's going to be very clear from the get go. This is not a Gibson product,
Yeah, yeah.
and that Flying V, it will have my logo on it, and yeah, it's kind of like, I think I've told this story before. There's a magazine called Fast Forwards and Mustang Monthly, and oh, I guess close to 30 years ago, I still lived in Gettysburg, and I was doing my laundry at a laundromat. And somebody had left the magazine, and they were talking about the Shelby Mustang, the GT 500, which was Carroll Shelby was a race driver,
Yeah, yeah.
and he talked
The cool.
Ford into sending him raw Mustangs that were not completed, and they would build full-on race cars out of these things. And then Ford, you could buy a GT 500, an actual race car, through your local Ford dealer. Well, the article, don't quote me on the numbers, but the article went through, how successful the GT 500 model was for the model year, let's say 1968, and talked about all the differences between the different years and had close-ups of why this is special and whatever. And it was, and I just, I don't really care about Shelby Mustangs, to be totally honest. But I sat there and read that because the author had a passion for it, and I got pulled into the author's passion.
Yeah.
And then the author wrote the coolest sentence I've ever read when it comes to this sort of thing. And it said that Ford Shelby GT 500 proved to be so successful that of the 385 made, over 6,000 exist today. And I lost it because it's funny. I mean, so many people will take a 68 Mustang and they turn it into, now people call them tribute cars, but
Yeah.
we call them clones. They'll put the tape stripes on and put the wheels on and whatever. And they'll take an article like that and they'll use that as a blueprint for them to actually make a fake GT 500. And in guitars, you have Gibson and Fender. A big part of their business is their reissue departments, where they make a brand new guitar that looks exactly like a beat up 1950s guitar.
Mm-hmm.
And the more accurate they get, the easier it is for forgers to take those guitars, make a few minor alterations, change some parts out, and then they can fool somebody that's not really versed in it. And lately, especially out of England, there's been a whole bunch of 1960 Les Pauls have shown up just out of nowhere. I mean, they're very rare, very hard to find. And all of a sudden, I know of like six that have just mysteriously all of a sudden been discovered in cabinets and barns, and they're in perfect condition. And the paint's not faded at all. And there's no checking. The finish isn't cracked. And the hardware doesn't have a whole lot of wear to it and everything. It's just amazing how clean these guitars are. And some jackasses over there making these guitars and then selling them as real to people that don't know.
Mm-hmm.
And at a lot of the vintage shows, I'm fortunate enough that people will consult me when they have an older guitar, and they'll say, Greg, what do you see when you're looking at this? And I'll go, well, that tailpiece isn't quite right. Those holes are in the wrong place. They didn't have these pickups this particular year,
Mm-hmm.
wrong fret wire. Um, and but it doesn't stop people from trying. When an original burst is worth upwards of $300,000, then it's worth putting the money for a criminal to put the money into making a forgery and pass it off.
Mm-hmm.
And there are some that basically do them in batches. The most famous guy, the guy that really is known for the first clones, my buddy Pete Baronet, he had a shop called Image Guitars in Los Angeles in the 80s. He worked on Eddie Van Halen's guitars for Ed. And he was getting older ES 175s and 335s that weren't worth a lot and harvesting the parts and then making Korina V's and Explorers and Les Pauls. And his idea was um, somebody that can't afford a real one, they could buy one of his, and they would have they would get the joy of playing an original one without having the cost. And his guitars were very good. And at the time, you didn't have an internet, you didn't have exhaustive research into why the classic guitars are still around. And so his intentions were good, but there were those that were buying guitars from him and then going to a different part of the country and selling it as a real guitar.
Yeah.
I owned two different Max Les Pauls, and when you open them
Did
up,
I ever see these guitars?
say again,
Did I ever see these guitars? Or
not at my house, no.
okay.
I owned them years ago, and the when you opened them up, I mean, the routes were not correct. The hardware was, he used modern potentiometers and switches, and his wiring and everything. He made no attempt to make them fake, but he did put the Gibson logo on. And there have been a few situations where guitars showed up in books of collections, and people will be looking through and they'll go, wait a minute, that's serial number, and they'll look at their real guitar and go, wow, 98813. Oh, well, I own 98813. And so now a lot of these guitars are being discovered. And again, Max wasn't, being dishonest, but he was making tributes, but he may have been a little naive at the time. Whereas now, there was a guy who was making outright dead nuts fakes, and I'm not going to mention the guy's name, but he uh, he sold one to a Japanese buyer and got a briefcase full of money. And as the story goes, he had a problem with powder, and so he went to score from his dealer and ended up flying out of a fourth floor
Wow.
window, because it was discovered that the guitar was not real. And you know, I guess people are willing to risk that sort of thing, but I'm not interested in that. My whole thing is, God knows if you do something wrong, He knows it. Nobody else will know, but He's going to know it. So, um, I have guitars I play on stage that you might think are old because they're Gibson reissues that I in turn antiqued even more, but they're actual Gibson guitars. And when I build guitars, I put my name on them and my logo. And it may look like Walter Becker had a gold top that I built for myself that he talked me out of. And it looked like a 50s Les Paul until you looked at the headstock and it very clearly was not. And I've built several for people. And the Flying V, that's actually, it doesn't quite fit in a Flying V case. I have a Gibson Flying V case, and it doesn't quite fit. So it's not an exact V. And these Explorers are
So,
not exact Explorers.
here's a question for you.
Yeah.
You don't have, do you have the exact, like, can you buy the exact pattern of a Flying V?
Oh yeah. Yeah. If you go on the internet, there's guys that'll sell you everything, exact patterns, all the tooling.
Do you do that?
Me,
Yeah.
I don't need it.
Okay. In other words, for the Flying V.
I I,
Okay.
I make what I want to make. I don't.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That's what I'm asking.
Yeah.
In
Yeah.
other words, that is your eye.
Martha Stewart does not use bird's eye mixed vegetables.
Right. Right.
Um, so
Color by numbers. Picasso does not do color by numbers.
well, if you take a real V and a VI built and you just hold them like this, you'll see immediately
Mhm.
how different they are. It's kind of like I remember back when I had BCR Music and the modeling amps happened, the Line 6 modeling amps. And this guy and I were talking, and we were listening to Queen in the store. He came in to buy strings. He's like, "Yeah," he said, "I have some Line 6 Spider or something." And he said, "It's got an AC30 setting on there, and it sounds exactly like an AC30. It's like you're playing through an AC30."
Yeah.
I said, "Oh yeah." And I dug out my AC30 and a Rangemaster pedal, because Brian uses a range. Well, it's a treble booster, but it's basically a Rangemaster. And I plugged this guy into that rig and I fired him up. And he started playing and he went, I said, "Yeah." I said, "You think it sounds like
Yeah.
what you're used to, but you're not playing through the real thing when you play
Yeah.
through a modeling it." And with all of this stuff, at a glance, it looks correct, but I'm not trying to make it look correct.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
why that's why there's redwood
Feel the
on
same
that.
way about Kempers.
Oh, Kemper's the greatest thing ever.
Yeah. Yeah.
And but with Kemper, it actually learns what the amp does, and then when you play through it, it gives you what the amp would do.
Yeah.
And it is mind blowing how effective that is. And it actually, like, I run my Kemper through my Marshall cabinet I've had forever, and when I set it on a JCM 800 setting, it's as if I'm playing through a JCM 800. The modeling amps didn't do it because you were asking a computer to simulate components and wire and heat.
Mhm.
And without heat, you don't have tone. And with Kemper, what they do is you're actually creating the heat when you're using the amp, and you put mics in front of the amp and you play a preordained series of things so that the Kemper can learn what the amp does. And then what the Kemper does is goes, okay, well, when this happens, you get this. When this happens, you get this. And it's like artificial intelligence, if you will.
Mhm.
And then later, when you plug into it, um, it's as if you are really using the real thing.
Yeah.
I had a situation at the shop where I had a Marshall cabinet, and I took a Kemper and an actual Marshall head. And anybody that had been in my old shop, BCR Music, there was a couch in the front. It's gone now. I should have grabbed that because that was a great couch. But I had guys sitting on the couch, and then halfway back, I had the cabinet, and then I was switching back and forth between the Kemper, set on a JCM 800, and then the actual JCM 800 head. And sometimes I would switch it. Sometimes it would just unplug and plug right back in. So they heard it,
Mhm.
thought it was being switched. And I would play, and 50% of the people were wrong all the time, which means basically nobody could tell.
Yeah,
And so yeah, Kemper's the real deal.
yeah.
And it's hard for me as a guy who has a bunch of old amps, and I've always
Yeah.
been such a purist about
All
vintage.
right, here's a question for you.
Oh, it's hard.
This is a this is something I saw on Facebook about everybody constantly dissing Tommy Thayer versus Ace, and it's like how Tommy Thayer does not have any kind of tone at all. Ace is the only.
Somewhere in my bag of picks, I have some Tommy picks, and
Yeah,
I wish I could find them quickly. There's a whole bunch of Paul's picks right there. Hey, how about this? We should do a show on this sometime. Neil Young on the Greendale tour. We were standing by the monitor board, and Neil was playing, and this harmonica wasn't working. So he whistled, and I looked, and he threw it underhand at me, and I caught it. And so this was my pass. And so I sealed it right up in a Ziploc bag. So I have Neil Young's DNA. So we could actually make as many Neil Youngs as we wanted because I have his DNA in this sealed, in this hermetically sealed bag. I have Neil Young DNA. So
people are ridiculous, is what I'm saying.
yeah, yeah. But man, yeah, sometime,
And I love, yeah, and we both know I love Ace Frehley. I'm
yeah.
not saying that. I'm not saying.
Tommy Thayer ain't ace. You know what? Tommy Thayer is a way better guitar player.
Yeah,
Um, Tommy Thayer is a really, really good guitar player. He's a hardworking dude. He ran the Kiss conventions and stuff. And then
yeah.
when they did the reunions, um, they actually made up a Space Ace costume just in case Ace couldn't make a show. And so
Which happened one of those that I attended. Ace never made the show that even though he was
yeah, well, he
he
yeah
was at the bar.
he and Peter both had real problems. I mean, the whole deal was they were full members of the band, and then when they left, they sold their likenesses and they sold their shares and everything. They got paid off and they walked away. Um, so when they came back, they were hired musicians for the first tour, and then they decided to make a record, and they went to Gene and Paul and said, we want our 25% back." And Gene and Paul were like, "No, no, not going to happen." So Peter on one of the tours um, just lost his shit, and they brought Eric Singer in, who even looks like Peter, and then with Ace. They had tried Vinnie Vincent and um, Mark
St. John.
St. John, that
Yeah,
poor
yeah.
fella.
No, I think Tommy Thayer is the one who is closest to he got the magic of Ace.
And you know what? He moves like Ace. He can play Ace's stuff note for note, and he does. And then on he plays Bruce Kulick's stuff note for note. Plays well. Nobody plays Vinnie Vincent note for note because Vinnie Vincent can't play Vinnie note for note. Um, but I don't know Tommy, but I've stood between him and Paul side stage during Gene's bass solo. And anybody out there that doesn't know me, I'm 5'6", 152 pounds. And um, Ace and or not Ace, Tommy and Paul are standing there while Gene's out there doing the stupid blood spitting bullshit. And I turned, and here's Paul right here. Paul's tech Fran was a great and good friend of mine. We lost him to COVID actually last year. But here's Paul and here's Tommy. And I look over and I'm about my eyes are level with about here on Paul. And
Yeah.
then I look the other side, and Tommy's the exact same height. And they have, their boots are, 12 inches tall or whatever it is.
Yeah.
And it was surreal. It was like I was surrounded by giants. And, um, but I watched Tommy work, and I was always like, oh man, they shouldn't be doing Ace and Peter's makeup. But I got to say, Eric does an incredible job of Peter. He's a way better drummer than Peter was, but he plays Peter's parts. And when he sings, he sounds like Peter.
Yeah.
Hard Luck Woman, you can't tell. And, it just sounds like Peter hitting all the notes, is what it is. And Tommy, to his credit, stepped into one of the most difficult jobs in rock and roll
Yeah.
and has done a great job. And I can't say anything against him. I wish they had their own characters. I wish, he wasn't Space Ace and Eric
But
wasn't.
you also
Yeah.
realize why he is Space Ace.
Yeah.
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 You're not.
Well, Paul and Gene have floated the idea that they would retire and Kiss would continue,
Yeah.
that the
With
characters would continue. I can't see that happening.
yeah.
I don't think
I
people
have
are
no
that
idea.
invested, but
I have no idea. I could see it happening.
you really?
It would be a reinvented young thing, a young version of it that would be something.
Well,
It would not sound just like it. It would be something reinvented.
I'm willing to be convinced.
So one more question, then we got to wrap it up.
Okay.
Wolfgang Van Halen.
Oh my God. The Taylor tributes.
Yes.
First off, I have a TV right above the bench here, and I was working the day that the London tribute went on. And a good friend of mine, Scott Perdoka, reached out to me and said, dude, turn on the TV. And I turned it on, and I turned it on right as Wolfgang started the second song. Now, I saw Eddie Van Halen live. I was fortunate enough to hang out with Eddie on a few occasions. And Eddie Van Halen was as close to God as anyone could be, as long as you didn't talk to him. I was never around him sober. I was around him when he was, dealing with alcohol issues.
Mhm.
And I met him in 1985. And then down through the years, I would see him at the PV booth at the NAMM show, or, walking through the crowd or whatever. And, but in 1978, when he came on the scene, 77, 78, he just changed everything. He and Hendrix, Les Paul,
And Hendrix.
Hendrix, and
Yeah, that's
Eddie
a
Van
good
Halen.
one. Okay, so in the 50s it was Les Paul, even 40s,
Yeah.
40s and
He
50s.
invented modern multi-track recording. We'll talk
Yeah,
about
yeah,
this. I mean,
yeah.
Les, you
Hendrix
cannot
in
be in this
the
industry
50s.
and not be affected by Les. You can't,
Yeah.
even if you never
Whether you
heard
like
of
him
him.
or not, whether you know who he is or not, doesn't matter.
Yeah. And but Ed, when Ed came along, he changed the rules, and every photograph of Ed Van Halen on stage, he's got that beautiful smile because he's having the time of his life.
Yeah.
All he wanted to do was play guitar. So he has this kid, Wolfgang. Back in MySpace days, Wolfie and I were friends when his dad was going through all the meth bullshit, and then he ended up, when he joined the band, he shut off his social media and stuff, and we fell out of touch. Um, but Wolfie has always struck me as a really, really intelligent, thoughtful person. And I've listened to some podcast interviews with him, and he has grown up to be a very thoughtful and intelligent adult. And on his album, Mammoth WVH, he played all the instruments.
Yeah.
I mean, him, Grohl, and Prince are the only three people I know that have pulled that off. So when I turned it on and I looked up, and there he was just ripping out, and he has the exact same feel in his playing that his dad had.
Yeah.
And my mind was blown. I was actually like sitting there just going, I, I had not seen that since I was a kid, and I saw Eddie Van Halen for the first time. So I am so glad that Eddie lives on through
Yes.
Wolfgang. And those that make fun of his weight can kiss my ass, because how he looks is immaterial. What he does is everything. And I'm willing to bet that the majority of people that are critical of his appearance are probably not swimsuit models themselves.
Yes. And
Um,
the
but
tools.
yeah, that whole Hawkins thing,
Yeah.
that London show. I mean, they got Rush back together, and then McCartney comes out
Yeah.
and Queen.
Yeah.
Oh my,
McCartney's the other one. I think Paul McCartney did his first solo album. Oh,
yes, he did. McCartney, yeah, up in
yeah.
Scotland.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we can add him to that very, very,
Very
very
small
small
list.
group of
Yes.
people that have pulled it off. Though that album, I gotta say, like, other than Maybe I'm Amazed and Hi Hi Hi, I don't think there's a lot of great songs on that, but it's a good effort.
Yeah.
Whereas the Wolfgang record, I mean, that's a great record stem to
Yeah.
stern,
Well,
and it
especially
doesn't
he
sound like
released
Van
that.
Halen.
He
It
released
does.
that. Yes.
It yeah, I'm so glad that
He
you know,
found it.
and
That's what I'm saying. He found his own voice within it.
very brave of him. I
Yeah.
know he's getting slaughtered on the internet. Yeah, you have a
Actually,
responsibility. He doesn't have responsibility to anybody but himself.
yes. Yeah.
You know, because I mean, Ed was a huge fan of Eric Clapton, but he doesn't sound anything like Eric
Yeah.
Clapton. So, um, yeah, Taylor Hawkins, what a loss.
Yeah.
And it's amazing how many people he touched, and that's kind of what's cool about the music business. I mean, there are the assholes, like Engve, and you know, every every episode I have to say something like that. And I notice I said like. So Engve's lawyers, leave me alone. I did not say that your client is a representation of a southern sphincter.
Yes.
I just merely used like.
Yes.
So, um, but there are so many fantastic people in this industry.
Ingve is kind of like a metaphor
Yes.
for a certain kind of a.
Yeah, and I was saying Ingvay,
Yeah. Yeah.
that Ingve.
Yeah. Yeah. Not the Jay Malmsteen one. The
What
ones
was
that
it?
differentiate all the other Ingve Malmsteens
Yeah,
of the world.
Ingve J. Malmsteen. It separates him from all the other Ingve Malmsteen.
Malmsteens of the
It was
world.
a hearing aid. That was a Spinal Tap on the
Yeah. Yeah.
hearing
Yeah.
aid video.
All right.
Spinal Tap's coming back.
Yep.
We got to talk about that.
All right. So
Spinal
when are we
Tap.
doing this next?
Next week, I guess.
All right. All
Back
right.
on a regular schedule.
Let's do it. Let's do it.
Provided I'm not out working for somebody, which has kind of been the problem.
All right. That's a good problem to have.
Well,
All
it's
right. At the Bench, episode 13. We wrap it up. Be good to each other.
yes, be
Don't be a
very good
dick.
to each other. God bless you all.
And yeah. See you later.